So we'll be at Matthew 22 this morning, and just as we start, I want you to just catch the very first two words. And again. Okay, there's a record in how far that I've made before having to jump in. I want you to remember the context of the conversation. Jesus has rode. Not yet, he'll rise later. I know, I just spoiled the ending. He rode into the city of Jerusalem. He went in and cleared the temple. Remember, they asked him, by whose authority are you doing this? What gives you the right? So he starts with a series of parables. And he looks at the Pharisees and he says, okay, which is the better kid? The one who stomps their feet and says, I won't do it, or the one who says, I will do it and doesn't? Because naturally, the one who does it, even when they said they wouldn't, is a better child than the one who lied to you and said it was done. And then he went on and he said another parable about the tenants and how they tried to steal the vineyard. And then he went on to say, well, you know, the cornerstone was rejected and it became a stumbling block. And the Pharisees go, I think he's talking about us. And they get angry. And so we go to 22 now, and 22 starts now with and again. It means Jesus isn't done talking to them. It means he's not about to let them go. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And he sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. Again, he sent other servants, saying, tell those who were invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. The king was angry, and he sent his troops, and he destroyed those murderers, and he burned their cities. Then he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads, and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find. And those servants went out into the roads, and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. I'm going to stop right there. I know there's another parable or another paragraph, but there's a lot to cover in just those verses. So he says, okay, let's go over this again. The kingdom of heaven is like a wedding feast that a king gives for his son. Okay, wedding feasts were a big deal. Remember how Jesus' ministry started? At a wedding. And the wedding went multiple days. How long do you think a royal wedding went? I mean, you stop and think about it. It was only a couple of years ago that there was another royal wedding over in the United Kingdom. And we celebrated July 4th for a long time. And yet there are still people who are fascinated with royal weddings. All right? Not even our king, not even our queen, but this is a once in a lifetime. So you're never going to see this glitz and this glamour and this opulence and this moment. It is where anybody who's anybody is going to be. You imagine what a meal at a royal wedding, a royal banquet, remember, 7 days long. You imagine what that's like? Could you imagine getting that invitation and saying, no, I've got something better to do? Okay? You get invited. Now, back then, the way it worked is you would send a servant out to all of the people and say, hey, this is happening on this day. And then another servant would go out and he'd go, hey, I just want to confirm this is still happening. In fact, the food just got put on. All right? That's the way it would work. And when the second servant came, you went, okay, the first one warned you it's coming, depending on how long you had to travel. And when that second one hit, you grabbed your best clothes and you went, oh, it's game time. Forget Golden Corral. This is a royal buffet. All right, we're going to rock this one. Grab the stretchy pants. The king invites them. And what do? I mean, it's a litany of lame excuses. He sent his servants and no one came. So he sent them a second time. All right? You didn't RSVP. You're coming, right? I really want you there. You're important enough that even though I'm the king, I'm pursuing you. I mean, I want you to realize that this is unheard of grace. Okay? Let's take this analogy further. You get invited to a royal wedding, and you're like, nah, I'm going to play hard to get. Because if they really want me there, they'll ask me a second time. Because this wedding wouldn't be a wedding if I wasn't. No, you wouldn't do that. And chance missing out, and chance angering the host, and this is the host you probably pay taxes to. I just want you to stop and consider that aspect. All right? If nothing else, for the sake of your house and your province, and you're going to smile and go. Instead, what happens? But they paid no attention to him. They went off. One to his farm, another to his business. I'm sorry, I'd love to go, but just can't break away. Well, the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. What is this saying? He's reminding the Pharisees and the scribes of their history. All right? The king invited you into his palace. He invited you into his temple. Every offering, well, most of the offerings, I can't say every offering, but the majority of the offerings, you offered part of it to God. But then the priest gave you a good portion of the offering back to take to your family and celebrate it. That was a regular part. If the people go, why do you need the book of Leviticus? Because the book of Leviticus will show you how the offerings work. And in most of the offerings, you put some of it on the altar, but then the priest goes, now take this back to your home and celebrate God's goodness. He goes, that's what you were called to do. And you couldn't do that. Instead, you made it a business. You made it a farm. You're selling sheep in the lobby. I had to chase them out. What are you doing? So what did the king do? The king got angry, and he sent his troops, and he destroyed those murderers and burned their city. You're going to see Rome do that. 72 AD. They're going to come in. They're going to knock Jerusalem's walls down. They're going to set fire to the temple. And you're going to see this fulfilled. Then he said to the servants, the wedding feast is ready. Those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, eat it all yourself. No. Therefore, Go to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find." And those servants went out to the roads, and they gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. My son deserves an audience. My son deserves a full wedding hall. My son deserves the best. And what overflows his table, well, even the dogs will eat the crumbs underneath. So that's the power of what's being said here. You know what? Fine. They won't go. You let in anybody and everybody. I don't care whether you think they're worthy or not. You open the doors to the banquet hall and you let them in, and the hall was filled. But now you get to this next part. And this next part gets a little pointed. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, "Bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen." Man, why is the king copying an attitude now? Why is the king angry about something as simple as this? Well, you have to remember that this is a generous king. This is a king who opened his doors, who opened his table. He is generous, but he is not without limits. And remember, that's in theme with what we've been talking about. Jesus is good, but he's not safe. Remember how we talked about how you don't want a safe God. You want a good God. You want a strong God. You want a warrior who goes to battle for you. You want somebody who conquers death, who steps on Satan's head as he's moving past. So you can't have it both ways. And he looks, and it is the role of the host for something like this, to make sure everything was perfect, would provide the outer garment. All you had to do was put on the robe the king gave to you. And you didn't want to even do that? The analogy here is very clear, because we put on Christ's righteousness, as Paul would write to the Philippians. As we read in Romans, that all of our good works, and it doesn't matter how many you have, Romans 10 makes it very clear, they're filthy rags before the Lord. In fact, you turn around and you go to Isaiah 64:6, and Isaiah is really graphic, because he will say all of your works are as menstrual rags before the Lord. All right? I mean, that's where you step back and go, that boy's making a point. All right? This is just, you're going to bring that to the king? No. Put on the king's robe. You see, here's the problem that we often run into, and I really believe, and you don't hear me say this often, okay? I'm not one for, it's never been as bad as it is now. You know, I've laughed every time I've said that. But I really believe, especially right now, we live in the middle of an epidemic where we want God, but we want to worship God how we want to worship Him, not how he says to worship him. Oh, the king has invited us to his table, but I'm not going to wear his dress code. I'm not going to do, I'm the king's subject and I have every right to be at that table, but let me tell you how I'm going to approach him. Well, here's the problem with that. The king is still the king, and you're still the subject whether you acknowledge it or not. So you can stomp your foot in front of the king and go, that's not fair, or I'm not wearing that, or I'm not doing that, or you should count this as righteousness, or you don't understand God. This is how I worship you. You know, the last group of people, actually, we're going to put it this way. The first group of people to say, I don't want to worship God this way, I want to worship him that way, made a golden calf. And we've been adding to the herd ever since. Because we all have our golden cows. We all have that sin that we just want to keep in the back and want God to just accept. And God's going, you need to make hamburger out of that thing. And we go, but you don't understand, this is how I worship. You cannot call him Lord and tell him no. Because then he's not Lord. You've overruled him. And that's what Jesus is putting forward here right now. That if you're going to call him Lord and step into his banquet, then you need to understand you are already under his authority, but now you're a guest in his house. Are you going to behave like one? See, everybody in the world is under his authority. Always have been and always will be. Doesn't matter how badly they stomp their feet. But how are they behaving in his house? Are they even going to his house? There's one going to his farm and one going to his business. And have they made a life out of persecuting his servants? That's the point of this. He continues. And I think Matthew is very, very poignant in where it goes to next. Because the Pharisees aren't about to let up. How dare he say, many are called and few are chosen, and we're not on that list. Then the Pharisees went and they plotted how to entangle him in his words. All right? Often, I tell you, you can't picture the Pharisees as like the twirling mustache, black cape, comic book villain. Here you can. Okay? They're plotting at this point. They're plotting how to entangle him in his words. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Now, what's a Herodian? Yeah. A Pharisee is basically really conservative. All right, a Pharisee has 600 some rules. This is what you need to follow to, be right with God. This is how we do things if we're Jewish. A Herodian is really liberal. Like so liberal that they took Herod as the, Herodian. They want to take Roman culture, and if we could just all like Hakuna Matata for a little bit, we could get along with Rome and everything would be fine. These are we just need to sing Kumbaya and everything's good. All right? This literally is taking the most conservative right you can find and the most liberal left you can find, putting them together and sending them to Jesus. I always find it interesting. Jesus can bring anybody together, even people who'd be stabbing each other if they weren't in front of him. And they go in front of Jesus. Now, one's a nationalist. The other is very much there is one Israel. And they sent their disciples to him, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true, and that you teach the way of God truthfully. Yeah, that sounds like an axe being sharpened, doesn't it? And you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. And there's the hair going across the axe. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Okay. Now, if Jesus says, don't pay taxes, what are the Herodians going to do? They're going to go running to Herod, saying, we have an insurrectionist here. You need to deal with him. And if Jesus says, you do need to pay taxes, well, we're coming up on an election cycle. How many candidates do you know of that are on the pay your taxes, in fact, pay more taxes platform? Not too many stake their turf on that, do they? So, you want us to pay taxes, Jesus? To Rome? Don't you know those taxes go to support an occupying force? Don't you know those taxes go to a pagan government? Don't you know those taxes go to persecute the church? It's a good thing we don't worry about that sort of stuff now, right? So, Jesus, what group are you going to make angry? Are you going to go to the left or the right? But Jesus, aware of their malice, says, why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Again, Jesus ain't pulling punches anymore. Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. A denarius is pretty much a day's wage coin. And Jesus says, whose likeness and inscription is this? See, they're looking to trap him in this moment. But he brings a coin. And he says, okay, who's got a coin? Who brought something this unclean into the temple? Here you go. Remember, the Jews had their own temple currency. You couldn't use this coin to buy the sacrifice, which is why there were money changers in the courts. He goes, hold the coin up. And if you looked at the coin on one side, there was an image of Tiberius, the emperor, and on the other side was his mother. All right, so if you ever want to flatten your mom, put her on the other side of a coin. I'm not sure, heads you get to look at anyway. But you get this moment here. And he goes, okay, on one side it said Tiberius, a picture of Tiberius, and it said Divine Augustus. Right? The August one, the divine one, the man, the God. On the other side, it said Pontifex Maximus. All right? The person who builds bridges. The Pope is called the Pontiff. Same sort of, bridge builder. So what is the coin declaring? That the emperor is the one who bridges the gap between divinity and everybody else. And Jesus says, hold this coin up. And he goes, okay, whose image is on the coin? Now, you can use this argument any which way you want to, but where Jesus is going with this is he's asking you, okay, whose likeness is on it? Well, Caesar's. Then give to Caesar's the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. What does that mean? That means you need to stop and ask, if Caesar's likeness is on the coin, whose likeness are you made in? Because the coin is minted and priced, and its value is set by Caesar. If I pull a $1 bill out and I add 2 zeros to the end of it, I'm going to jail. What happens? I walk into the store and I try to pay my groceries with a $100 bill so I can get all 4 boxes of cereal that buys. I can try to give them a dollar with 2 extra zeros, and they'll look at me and go, "Are you trying to go to jail?" "No, I'm trying to pay my bill. Take it." "No, this is a $1 bill." "No, I say it's a $100 bill." Guess what? I don't have the authority to set the value of that currency. You were made in the image of God, which means who has the authority to set your value? He does. Every life you encounter, the image of God is stamped upon, and the blood of Christ was paid for. Unless you're willing to make a higher offer than that, and I will be very curious to see what you put up as collateral. What Jesus is saying is you need to give to God what is God's. And you need to look long and hard in a mirror. And it's a lesson we still need to hear, because a lot of Christians get really distracted chasing things with Caesar's image on it and not looking long enough in the mirror to see God's image on them. In fact, in a lot of ways, let's be honest, we don't like when April 15th rolls around. But there's a lot of people who find it easier to give to Caesar what is Caesar than to give to God what is God's. Well, Caesar just, makes me hurt one day a year. God wants 52 Sundays. And Christmas and Easter. God blesses you with every day. So as you see this, when they heard it, they marveled, and they left him, and they went away. So that didn't work. Well, now that same day, on verse 23, now the Sadducees are going to come up to them. Remember this? Okay, we've had the Pharisees, we've had the Herodians. Who's left? Now the Sadducees are sort of the leaders, the governmental leaders. And they don't believe in anything supernatural. All right? It's the old joke. If you need to remember, okay, the Pharisees believed in God and all of that. The Sadducees believed in the first 5 books of the Bible. They believed that they were God's chosen, but they didn't believe in anything supernatural. They were sad, you see. That's how you remember it. Because if you don't believe in the supernatural, guess what you don't believe in? Life after death. So you have to understand, coming into this conversation, they find the idea of life after death to be ridiculous. The Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, "Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up the offspring for her brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, and having no offspring left his wife to his brother. So too the second and the third, all the way down to the 7th. Talk about a black widow. After them all, then the woman died. In the resurrection of these 7, whose wife will she be? For they all had her." How are you going to figure this one out, Jesus? She's suddenly going to, what? Is this going to be one big group family? How is this going to work? It's going to be awkward, Jesus. Jesus answered them, "You are wrong. because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. I'll tell you what, there's a verse that ought to shake you. In fact, I probably should add this to my list of the world's worst confirmation verses. I try to keep a track of those just for practice. When they come up, I'll give you the worst verse now in practice, and you have something better on confirmation day, maybe. For in the resurrection they will neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished by his teaching. You just see Jesus again. Goes, okay, let's deal with this. The Sadducees are coming at him and they're challenging him over what is called a Levirate marriage. Right? And you're going to find that all the way back in Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 to 10. And basically to protect the woman and to protect the family name. Because remember, there are tribes and inheritance passes through the birthright. It's important. You see this echo in things like Ruth. The entire book is about the passing of the inheritance. Well, what if there were 7 brothers and none of them gave an heir to this woman? And finally, they die. Does it sound ridiculous? Yes. Are they intentionally mocking the system? Yes, this is sarcasm at its peak. This is right up there, and every pastor rolls their eyes because every kid will yell it at you like it's the first. You've never heard this before, Pastor. Can God make a rock he can't lift? But you say he's all powerful, ha ha ha. Well, then he can't. This is stupid. That's what this is. And Jesus just steps back and he goes, you're ignorant. That's literally what it says. You are ignorant of the Scriptures. And he goes, you're talking about things you can't even begin to understand. When we get to heaven, when we enjoy the new creation, you're going to be like the angels. Neither given nor given in marriage. Now, I could try to talk to you. Well, does that mean angels are genderless? Does that mean angels don't marry? Look, I don't know. And I'm secure enough in my faith to look at you and say, I don't know. But I imagine I'm going to find out relatively soon. All right? I'm hoping not tomorrow. I'll be honest with you. But if it is, I won't be disappointed because I know where I'm going. But as soon as I get there, I'll go, oh, that's what that meant. You want to argue with somebody over whether, how all of this works? It's sort of like wrestling in the mud with pigs. You're getting filthy and the pig has a great time and he's never going to admit you won. All right? Jesus goes, do you think you can understand heaven? You haven't been there yet. You know who has? This guy. I've been there. Just slow your roll. You're being hypocritical. You're being ignorant. And then he goes on to hit him with Exodus 3:6. All right, he goes, I want to talk to you because God said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That means even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are spoken about in the past tense, God's speaking about them in the present tense. All right? Every time God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to any of their descendants, he's saying, look, they ain't in the past tense. They're in the present tense to God. It's not, I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It wasn't, well, they've gone the way of the dinosaurs, but I can be your God now. Look, basically what he's saying is if God isn't relegating it to the past tense, you shouldn't either. And every time a Christian does a funeral, that's what needs to be front and center in our mind. Because that's where our hope rests. God does not speak about anybody in the past tense, because they are all present before the Lord. What more do you have to worry about? What more can threaten you? So as he confronts them here, he says, look, this is how it is. And the crowd's astonished. I would be astonished if I could have made it through this whole chapter. I was close. Again. But I want you to see as we read through this, they're seriously coming after Jesus right now. And he is being very straightforward and very honest with them. Yes, he's using parables. But the purpose of the parables is to speak a truth. Because at the end of this week, his actions will speak louder than his words as he submits to death upon a cross. And in a few moments, his actions will speak louder than his words as you are invited up to the table of the Lord to receive his very body and blood given and shed for you. My friends, you have been called by the Lord. He has sent his servants out to invite you to his feast. He has given you a white robe. And he has asked for you to be present in his court. I want you to dwell on that tonight. You are made in the image of God. And you are fearfully and wonderfully created to reflect his grace, his peace, his love, and his mercy.